Okay, we just basically got to the some of the most important bits of her theory here, which is the idea that, what is gender? What is its relationship to sexuality? How do these concepts come into existence? Well, they come into existence through this dance of mutual definition back and forth, where we sort of confront the other in our subjectivities, but it's not a mutual confrontation of subjectivities. One is considered the absolute, where one is the other. One is defined in relation to the absolute subjectivity of the other. Okay. So let's keep going. The category of the other is as primordial as consciousness itself. In the most primitive societies, in the most ancient mythologies, one finds the expression of a duality, that of the self and the other. This duality was not originally attached to the division of the sexes. That seems important. It was not dependent upon any empirical facts. It is revealed in such works as that of Granet on Chinese thought and those of Dumezil on the East Indies and Rome. Who is she talking about? I don't know. There's no citations. The feminine element was at first no more involved in such pairs as Varuna, Mitra, Uranus, Zeus, Sun, Moon, and day and night than it was in the contrast between good and evil, lucky and unlucky auspices, right and left, God and Lucifer. Otherness is a fundamental category of human thought. It took sort of human beings and our own sort of social impulses for domination to say, this group of others themselves need to be subordinated to us as a group of absolute subjects who get to define power for definition, power to control society, and all these other things. Thus, it is no group ever. It is that no group ever sets itself as the one without at once setting up the other over and against itself. So the one is another way of saying the absolute subject. If three travelers chance to occupy the same compartment, that is enough to make vaguely hostile others out of the rest of the passengers on the train. In small town eyes, all persons not belonging to the village are strangers and suspect to the native of a country. All who inhabit other countries are foreigners. So basically, she's just giving examples of all the different ways in which we set ourselves against others. This is my in-group, this is my out-group, this is who's defining, this is who's not defining. So it's not the case that because woman is the inessential other, that she can't also be an absolute subject in other relationships. Jews are different for the anti-Semite. Negroes are inferior for the American racist. Aborigines are native for colonists. Proletarians are the lower class for the privileged. Levi-Strauss, at the end of a profound work on the various forms of primitive societies, reaches the following conclusion. Passage from the state of nature to the state of culture is marked by man's ability to view biological relations as a series of contrasts, duality, alternation, opposition, and symmetry, whether under definite or vague forms, constitutes not so much phenomena to be explained as fundamental and immediately given data of social reality. These phenomena would be incomprehensible if, in fact, human society were simply a Mitsein, sort of means a being with others. That's a Heideggerian term, or fellowship based on solidarity and friendliness. So being with is this way of kind of undermining that hostility of the self and other. Things become clear on the contrary if, following Hegel, we find in consciousness itself a fundamental hostility toward every other consciousness. The subject can be posed only in being opposed. He sets himself up as the essential as opposed to the other, the inessential, the object. But the other consciousness, the other ego, sets up a reciprocal claim. The native traveling abroad is shocked to find himself in turn regarded as a stranger by the natives of neighboring countries. As a matter of fact, wars, festivals, trading, treaties, and contests among tribes, nations, and classes tend to deprive the concept other of its absolute sense and to make manifest its relativity. So this is just the idea that, if you're moving between places, between spaces, you can go from absolute subject to other, back and forth. It really depends on social factors. Willy-nilly, individuals and groups are forced to realize the reciprocity of their relations. How is it then that this reciprocity has not been recognized between the sexes? That one of the contrasting terms is set up as the sole essential, denying any relativity in regards to its correlative and defining the latter as pure otherness. So her argument here is that as we move through the world at different spaces, traveling is her example, we're able to sort of reverse the self-othering, the other self dynamic. But with the sexes, it seems to be really reticent. It doesn't seem to change. It seems like this back and forth is, it sticks. It sticks. And she's wondering why. Why is it that women do not dispute male sovereignty? No subject will readily volunteer to become the object, the inessential. It is not the other who, in defining himself as the other, establishes the one. So the point here being, why don't women come together and challenge the absolute subjectivity of men to be the defining neutral? I mean, of course they have. The idea being here, women are not responsible, on Beauvoir's view, for setting up this power dynamic. It's not the other who, in defining themselves as other, establishes the one. So they didn't put together this system. The other is posed as such by the one in defining himself as the one. But if the other is not to regain the status of being the one or finding some kind of equality, he must be submissive enough to accept this alien point of view. Whence comes this submission in the case of woman? So the idea is that women have the ability to challenge the authority of the subjectivity of men. They just haven't been. So why? They haven't done it enough. Why? There are, to be sure, other cases in which a certain category has been able to dominate another completely for a time. Very often, this privilege depends upon inequality of numbers. The majority imposes its rule upon the minority, or persecutes it. But women are not a minority. Like the American Negroes or the Jews, there are as many women as men on earth. Again, the two groups concerned have often been originally independent. They may have been formally unaware of each other's existence, or perhaps they recognize each other's autonomy. But a historical event has resulted in the subjugation of the weaker by the stronger. She's trying to find, what caused this submission in women where they ended up not challenging the absolute subjectivity of men. And she's saying, we can look into history to understand some other forms of oppression. The introduction of slavery into America, the conquest of imperialism are examples in point. In these cases, the oppressed retained at least the memory of former days. They possessed in a common past tradition, sometimes a religion or culture. The parallel drawn by Bebel between women and the proletariat is valid in that neither ever formed a minority or a separate collective unit of mankind, and instead, this is so funny, this is because of the translator. Anyway, and instead of a single historical event, it is in both cases a historical development that explains their status as a class and accounts for the membership of particular individuals in that class. But proletarians have not always existed, whereas there have always been women. They are women in virtue of their anatomy and physiology. Throughout history, they have always been subordinated to men. Oh, she's got a little footnote there. Whatever could that be? With rare exceptions. There you go. Oh, that's translator. Thanks. And hence, their dependency is not the result of a historical event or social change. It was not something that occurred. She's kind of upset here with Marx and Engels, who kind of say that the reason why women are oppressed is because of because of capitalism. So when they argue that the introduction of private property was the historical defeat of women, because women then needed to be subordinate to men to keep patrilineage through children to pass down property. So they call that the historic defeat of women, and that the women had the ability to be equal or to have, be able to challenge men before that. So she's taking issue with them here. That's some of what's going on behind the scenes. Throughout history, they have always been subordinated to men, and hence their dependency is not the result of historical event or social change. It's not something that occurred. The reason why otherness, in this case, seems to be an absolute is in part that it lacks the contingent or incidental nature of historical facts. A condition brought about at a certain time can be abolished at some other time, as the Negroes of Haiti and others have proved, but it might seem that a natural condition is beyond the possibility of change. It might seem that a natural condition is beyond the possibility of change. Right, so if we think that women's subordinate nature, they have a subordinate nature or they're submissive by nature, we just say, well, they're not going to overthrow this, they're not going to challenge the subjectivity of men. In truth, however, the nature of things is no more immutably given, so it's not given for all time, than is historical reality. If woman seems to be the inessential, which never becomes the essential, so that's inessential is the other, and the essential being the subject, the absolute subject, or the one, it is because she herself fails to bring about this change. So this is considered quite, controversial. A lot of people take an issue with this part of her view, the idea being that women have not changed their oppressed position because they haven't done anything to really change it themselves. It's good because it means that women have that possibility. So that's baked into her theory, this idea that women can overthrow the position that they're in and become equal. She would not want to reinstate the absolute subject or whatever. That would not be her view. But at the same time, it has been interpreted as sort of blaming women for their own oppression. So you kind of have to come down on one part of this and say, where do we want the possibility of liberation to be? Do we want it to be, well, I'll just leave you with that question. Where do you want it to be? Proletarians say we, right? They protest, they come together and say, we're the working class, we want these rights. Negroes as well. Regarding themselves as subjects, they transform the bourgeois, the whites, into others. So they're contesting and throwing back that valuation. But women do not say we, except at some congress of feminists or similar formal demonstration. Men say women, and women use the same word in referring to themselves. They do not authentically assume a subjective attitude. So they haven't kind of come together to redefine in opposition. She's writing in 1947, 1948. They do not authentically assume a subjective attitude. The proletarians have accomplished the revolution in Russia. The Negroes in Haiti, the Indochinese are battling for it in Indochina. But the woman's effort has never been anything more than a symbolic agitation. They have gained only what men have been willing to grant. So she's referencing suffrage here. They have taken nothing. They have only received. The reason for this is that women lack concrete means for organizing themselves into a unit which can stand face to face with the correlative unit. They have no past, no history, no religion of their own, and they have no such solidarity of work and interest as that of the proletariat. They are not even promiscuously herded together in the way that creates community feeling among the American Negroes, the ghetto Jews, the workers. Okay, so she's just talking about people who get to live together and form solidarities that way. She's basically building to the point that women, patriarchy divides women. That's part of how that social system operates. It divides them so that they never form a we to really contest that group that they're in. They have lived dispersed, among the males, attached through residence, housework, economic conditions, and social standing to certain men. And then that's fed their complicity, because that's given them protection, patriarchal protection. If they belong to the bourgeoisie, they feel solidarity with men of that class, not with proletarian women. If they are white, their allegiance is to white men, not to Negro women. The proletariat can propose to massacre the ruling class, and a sufficiently fanatical Jew or Negro might dream of getting sole possession of the atomic bomb and making humanity wholly Jewish or black. Anyway, but women cannot even dream of exterminating the males. There's feminist science fiction from the 70s that talks about that. But anyway, the bond that unites her to her oppressors is not comparable to any other. The division of the sexes is a biological fact. We're going to talk about this, but think of this more in terms of not necessarily that there's this essence of a body and then there's this essence of a body. She sort of means that bodies have reproductive functions. They vary. The whole biology chapter is about bodily variation, but there were the division of these groups that she's talking about, these social groups, is rooted not in a history, but it's rooted in reproductive function. Male and female stand opposed within a primordial midsign, and woman has not broken it. The couple is a fundamental unity with its two halves riveted together, and the cleavage of society along the line of sex is impossible. Here is to be found the basic trait of woman. She's the other, in a totality of which the two components are necessary to one another. So that's what's made it so hard for her to overthrow it.